All right, can everyone hear me? And most importantly, can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, great. So look at this. Oh, yes. Look at that. All right, so I'm just going to go to, let's see, Josh, I think has something. I'm going to go to site boundary. So this is one of our proposals in Forma, and I basically just made a rectangle for our site boundary. It, I, I'm struggling to remember if I made it exactly 50 by 140. So I'm just going to delete that. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly make a new one. But you guys can use this proposal to generate or issue a site file that we're going to bring into Revit here in just a few. So that's why I just want to make sure it's all set before everybody makes duplicates of this, gets a file out of it, a surface file and or a mesh file. Let's see. Um, Golly, I don't. There's site limit. There we go. All right. And I'm just going to go right over here and I'm going to try to draw what looks like 50 feet. Just say 50 tick. 90 degrees later, 140 feet tick. We'll leave a generous right of way for that alleyway there. 50 feet, and it's already in telesensing where I'm going here. All right, so I just wanted to get that on there just in case. And I'm actually just going to, if I can select this move, I'm just going to move it just a little bit off this way. Let's see here. If I can, do I have to click and, yikes. All right, I'll try to, okay, here we go. Move. Yay, ay, ay, ay. And I'm just going to give myself a little bit of space here. We have plenty of room over here. Try to make sure we have enough right of way over here for sidewalk, etc. All right, so first things first. Let's see. I am going to make sure I have the right thing selected here, site boundary. And you see over here in the dot, 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 I'm going to go to this and I'm going to say, now here's what's interesting. I used to in Revit 2026 and 2025, I could just say send to Revit and it would link up in a Revit in one click of a button. It's really nice. For whatever reason, they don't let you do that in Revit 2027. What's happened, from what I understand, is that they've started to add to this Forma suite, to this online cloud-based stuff. So it's not just site design, but you can also start to do early building design stuff, pre-design, feasibility studies, massing studies, even construction management and CA at the end. And so with that more robust system, they don't want you using this add-on and just sort of moving files back and forth. It's I guess a little more of a sophisticated system over the cloud. And but the reason why I'm upset about that is because as educational users, I don't think we have access to that system. So suddenly this link is broken for us. And I can't get a straight answer from Autodesk tech support about if they have plans to fix that or how or when or whatever. They just keep giving me the runaround as if they don't understand what the problem is. It's like, even no matter how much I explain it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say export. I'm going to export this as an IFC file. That's an international file exchange format for building information modeling. It's something that a bunch of folks agreed to in trying to sort of create a little more interoperability between platforms, understanding that using just proprietary native Revit files or Rhino files or Bentley MicroStation files sort of locks you into one platform, but that doesn't have the interoperability across them. So IFC is a platform that's supposed to again make sure that everything's interoperable as much as possible between various platforms without losing information, without losing relationships between geometries, associations between parameters and your geometry. So I'm just going to say export as IFC beta, and it's going to tell me that it's exporting this whole site file. It'll be downloaded automatically when it's complete. Like a cooking show, I already have one saved here in my downloads. Let me just pull that up here. Let's see, it's somewhere in here. Oh gosh, I actually need to clean this out, don't I? let's see. I promise you there is one, but it also looks like I just downloaded another one. And that's really all I'm going to do right now in Forma. I just want to get that site information out of Forma and I'm going to bring it into Revit. All right. And here's my Windows window. Seems redundant. I'm just going to open up Revit 2027. All right. Now, a few things about Revit while I wait for this to get started. Yeah, see, it's loading. It's just a big behemoth of a software. But it's actually designed specifically for the building industry, as opposed to Rhino. Um, and it's called building information modeling because it theoretically you're building the building virtually before you build it physically, right? And so what it tries to do is tag each piece of geometry with the appropriate and holistic information needed to understand it, not just what it looks like on the screen, but how it can be shown in drawing formats, how it could be made, what it's made out of, or referencing a particular material, component, or a piece of furniture from the suites catalog, etc. And so, what's nice about it is it's made to be a platform where you can share and coordinate things across architecture and the allied disciplines. So if you're working on a building project, and of course you probably have a landscape architect that you're working with, you probably have an interior architect or interior designer that you're working with, you probably have a structural engineer that you're working with, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, on and on and on, right? All of these folks are there to help you, but they need to be able to read your drawings. They need to be able to insert their own drawings and parts of their scope of the building, so that at the end of the day, the building information model becomes a database for everybody's information, to make sure it all works and fits, to reduce errors, to avoid collisions, and and to, again, make things sort of faster and better, I guess you might say. It really it's been now what, like, oh gosh, almost 20 years ago, that this idea of building information modeling was just taking off. And slowly, incrementally, it's then sort of replaced this sort of old way of sort of drawing two-dimensional plans and sections in AutoCAD and making drawings manually. Because as you can see, building a virtual model and then all of the drawings are sort of extracted from the model, right? So we cut sections, we cut plans from a virtual model rather than trying to design and plan a section and then piece together what this thing looks like three-dimensionally, like we had to do, um, pre-computer, right? So, all right, all of that said, what that means is that sometimes Revit's going to ask you a bunch of questions that you have no business trying to answer right now at the early stages of design and as a beginning architecture student, right? You say, I just want to make a vertical plane like I did in Rhino, and it's going to say, oh, you want to make a wall? What kind of wall is it? What is it made out of? What are all the systems inside the wall? And how deep is it as a result, right? And you're like, I just want a 6-inch wall, right? So keep that in mind, right? Like it's not necessarily the great design tool. I would say when you do use it, it's kind of like designed by pull down menu. So you got to sort of again, my take here is to introduce you to a tool like Rhino that lets you have geometric freedom, and then a tool like Revit that wants to sort of turn it back into a piece of architecture, and then you can start to see how those two are actually really complementary to each other. They're not mutually exclusive at all. All right. So when I open up Revit, and I just recommend maybe watching this morning because in the afternoon in studio, you'll have a chance to do this all step by step. But I'm just going to say new, and it's going to give me an option. Do I want to use a template or do I want to use no template? The only difference here is that if I use no template, I'm going to have to create a bunch of scope boxes and things like that from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say Imperial multidiscipline, or maybe yours has an option for imperial architecture. But I'm just going to say imperial. That's why we keep things as feet and inches, as opposed to metric. If you're working overseas, you'd probably pick metric. But since we're in the United States, we'll go ahead and go with feet and inches. I'm going to say make sure that it's selected on project. I don't want to create a new project template. I want to use this template and create a new project. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. All right, and this interface looks a little different. So what you'll notice as it starts to load up is that first and foremost, we have a set of tabs up here along the top. That's really important. We'll move back and forth between architecture, structure, maybe a little bit of steel, analyze, massing and site, view is an important one. So we'll go back and forth between some of these tabs. And when we start to select things, you'll understand that there's a modify tab. So we select something, let's say a floor, and it'll take us to the modify tab and it'll say, what do you want to do to that floor? Why are you selecting that? Do you want to stretch it, put a hole in it, move it, rotate it? What are you trying to do here? Right. So anyway, there's a lot here to sort of dig into, but suffice to say, as we start to create new things in Revit, things like a lot of concrete, structural columns and beams, architectural floors, walls, doors, curtain walls, etc., ramp stairs, railings, whatever. We'll sort of go back and forth between a lot of these tabs. Okay. And the other important part here is that I have two boxes here. One is called Properties, and one is called Project Browser. All right. So when I select something in my scene here, let's say this is level one architectural plan. In the properties box, it gives me the properties. So it's telling me that this is a scope box that I've selected. Its height is 100 feet, and I can change that here if I wanted to, right? I can see its parameters. I can see its properties. I can begin to change these things, adjust them as needed, right? That's hence the name properties box. Um, and in my project browser, you can see that as I work, it starts to generate floor plans, sections, elevations, three-dimensional views, etc. And when I want to create new views, I can do that. And when I do, they'll show up here in my project browser. All right, so I have a level one floor plan. I have a level two floor plan. I can go and double click that and I can see that it too is blank. And as I start to go through these, let me go to an elevation. Let's say I have an east elevation, right? Looking at the project sideways from the east. Um, you can see that I'm pulling up all of these drawings and I can toggle back and forth between them and start to draw and model, just like if they're different viewports in Rhino, right? So I can have a 3D viewport, I can have a perspective viewport, I can have a top or level one or level two or level three architectural plan view, elevation views, section views, etc. Right? And as I open these up, they stay open and they become tabs, just like in Photoshop when you start to open up multiple files and you have these tabs, you can sort of toggle back and forth. Okay. This is all the same file, just different views of it, different drawings, right? This is the East architectural elevation drawing. Here's a level two drawing, level one drawing, right? This is a lot to throw at you. But suffice to say, um, I want to just sort of get us immersed. And the more you use this over the next 2 weeks, the more some of these things will just become second nature to you, okay? So don't worry if you don't get everything. Like it looks really confusing and like there's a lot of information at first. Don't worry, you'll with some practice and some time, you'll learn. Okay. So I want to encourage you to, or I want to keep you from getting too discouraged if you feel a little overwhelmed at the moment. Now you can see that there's all kinds of things in the project browser. If I scroll down, I can start to make construction document sheets. I'm not going to get into that. That's not appropriate for beginning design. You'll start talking about that when you start taking CTech, construction technology courses and building systems courses, and over the next year or so, and you start maybe even get into a firm to do some to work as an intern. That's when you really start to learn about the ins and outs, the sort of deep learning about drawing sets. But anyway, okay, so. Another thing that's, I think, interesting is that when I have this floor plan, this is level one architectural floor plan. You can see it's under the floor plans here in the project browser, is that it gives me these tags. So it already automatically puts a north arrow. I don't know why it uses this typeface for the N. It looks terrible. Like, why is that serifed when everything else is sans serif? Oh, it drives me crazy. What the hell were you thinking, Autodesk? Maybe I can select that and I can change the font, the typeface. There's a way to do it. It just really drives me crazy to see that. Like, why use that typeface when you use everything else, something else everywhere? Whatever. All right, drives me up a wall. Graphic scale. You see these. These are the notes for or the tags for elevation. So that's the east elevation. If I want to see that east elevation, I can double click on that and it'll open up the east elevation. So rather than digging through my project browser, right? You can see here I have levels. I have level one and level two. Those refer to floor plans. If I double click on level two, will it take me to level two? No, it won't. If I double click on the label, I can start to change these and I can start to add different labels to them. Anyway, um, let's see, back to level one. Oh, you can also see I have a section cut here, right? So that's a section cut marker. And well, let's look and see if I have a building section here. There we go, sections, working section, section oh 01. There we go. So that's what section one looks like at the moment. And where is that section being cut? Let's go to level one, floor plan, right there, right? So it's really cutting through nothing, looking north, because we have nothing in our model at the moment, okay? So here's what I want to do, and I'll probably have to re-explain this over time and just keep reminding you this. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the site information from Forma and we're just going to link it up into Revit. We're not if we ever need to edit the site, we're not going to edit the site in Revit. We go back to Forma and edit it, and then next time we open up Revit, we'll see the changes have updated, right? Because it's linked. Um, and it's the same thing for your light vessels. Your light vessels are modeled in Rhino, and we're going to leave them in Rhino. We're going to link them up into Revit. So if you need to make a change to your light vessel, you go back into Rhino and make the change. Next time you open things up in Revit, you'll see the updates. All right. Um, and then there's all the parts that we're going to actually the rest of the building that we're going to model in Revit. Things like corridors, stairs, elevators, shafts and cores. Did I say stair? Fire stair, egress stairs, and then in these other parts of the building, we'll need to make envelopes. So we'll talk about wall types. We'll make some walls, including curtain walls and things like that. So anyway, what I'm doing again is we're being very particular and careful about what we're modeling in Rhino that needs Rhino's superpowers and what we're modeling in Revit using Revit superpowers. So Rhino gives you maximum geometric freedom. So we can make walls that look like Tetris shapes and it doesn't give us a bunch of errors and we don't have to try to fool Rhino into doing that. It just does it for us really nicely. Whereas Revit wants to put everything in a box, wants to give it everything a category, and then wants to give you a bunch of preset rules for how you can actually deploy them. So that's where we can use the standard kit of parts, right? Rhino's good at the non-standard, and Revit's good at the standard. So here's what I mean by that, and I'm just going to quickly do a quick demonstration that you don't need to follow along with because you're not this isn't part of your projects. But I'm just going to go to the architecture tab. I'm in level one floor plan. I'm just going to go to walls. I'm going to say wall architectural. And when I do that, you can see in my properties box, I have all kinds of options on the kinds of walls I can make, right? So if I want to make an 8-inch concrete wall, 10-inch, 12, 18, 24, 24, that's a big dude. That's a big wall. Big, thick wall, 2 feet thick wall. Or bricks and CMU on metal studs, etc., right? You can sort of see that there's all kinds of this sort of typical generic sort of wall types that you might use in a wall section here. Masonry, filled reinforced masonry, or just interior partitions that are maybe just some metal studs and some gypboard. Um, and as a result are quite thin, etc., right? Retaining walls are here. Then there's curtain walls, so we can do exterior glazing, curtain wall, storefront down at the towards the street level, etc. So there you can see that there's a lot of options here. What I'm just going to do really quickly is I'm just going to make a generic wall. I'm just going to say generic. Let's go with, yeah, I might want to go with 8-inch, 8-inch wall. Maybe I'm thinking it, later on, I'm not quite sure if it's going to be masonry, if it's going to be concrete. But 8 inches gives me a good starting point. What I can do is I can start to draw my walls. You can see that this is much different than Revit. In that Revit, or sorry, much different than Rhino. In that Rhino just thinks you're making surfaces and then offsetting them. It doesn't understand them as walls. Revit wants to understand these as walls and start to close up corners. Just make sure that this aligns. And I'll close this up, right? And again, it's making everything 8 inches already because I gave it an 8-inch wall. If I select all of these, What's interesting about this is like, let me just go back and show you a little more about what I was doing there. I'll go to 8-inch wall and I'll start to draw. I'm just going to zoom in a little more though. You can see that right now it's putting 4 inches on one side and 4 inches on the other side. In other words, it thinks I'm drawing the wall center line and deploying the wall about that center line accordingly. But of course, I can change that, right? My properties, I could say maybe there's a core center line, or maybe I'm drawing to the inside of the wall or the outside of the wall, finish face interior. Now suddenly you can see that as I start to draw clockwise, I'm drawing to the inside of the wall. If I'm counterclockwise, it starts to draw the outside. But anyway, you can see that there's a big difference here between Revit and Rhino. And you can see that now I have walls really quickly in my plan view. And let's take a look at a 3D view. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do, again, I was in the architecture tab, going to walls, and then I was picking the wall I want, and then starting to draw here on my floor plan. And so I'm drawing something in my level one floor plan, and it's a wall. Let's take a look at what it's doing three-dimensionally in the meantime. Let me go to view, and I'll go to 3D view, default 3D view. All right, now I have a default Axon 3D view to go along with my level one floor plan and my section. You can see my section. I can start to see these walls in elevation. All right. And what's interesting in my section, as you can see there, I have my level one marker, my elevation marker. That's like grade or the finished floor of level one. 12 feet up by default in this template, Revit gave me a second floor, that elevation marker at 12 feet. So this is 0 feet, 0 inches, 12 feet, 0 inches. You can see that my walls by default just went to some height. Let me just show you what that looks like. I'll just select one of these walls here. There's my axon. And you can see that my base constraint, in other words, where the wall, the bottom of the wall starts, is at level one. So right at that ground. And the top constraint, it's not connected to any level, and it just gives you an unconnected height of 20 feet. So these are just 20 feet walls, regardless of how my floor to floor heights work, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, you know what? Let's actually connect this to level two. Let's just make this a wall that goes from level one and stops at level two, right? So I've changed my top constraint. You can see that that wall has changed along with it. I can do that with all my walls if I'd like. Um, and so let me just do that really quickly. Let's just do that. Just go around really quickly. Use my control key. Just click instead of clicking and dragging. And I'll go ahead and put this to all to level two. All right. So you can see that, again, as I start to build geometry, I can always select that geometry. I can look at its parameters. I can change things and adjust things in real time. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that now that I've done that, level one, each wall starts at level one down here and ends at level two. And so if I look at my section, right, that looks to be the case. I have this other thing I'll just delete here. All right, there we go. And what happens now if I change, let's say my floor to floor height? Let's say instead of 12 feet, I'll just unclick this. I'll go up to here and I'll say, actually, I want 15 feet floor to floor. You can see that as I change that height, because I didn't say the wall is 15 feet or 12 feet tall, I said it goes from level one to level two. If I change where level one and level two are, everything is associated with those levels and everything changes and modifies with it. Okay. So suddenly now I have 15 feet high walls, not because I told it it's going to be 15 feet, but because I moved the distance between level one and level two to 15 feet. Okay. All right. So those are some key differences here when we're talking about Revit versus Rhino, right? Rhino, it's like the Wild West. You can model just about any piece of geometry. We didn't even talk about all the compound curvatures and using sub-Ds and meshes and things like that. But suffice to say, then when it comes to just sort of making floors, walls, railings, windows, things like that, glass with frames and things like that, Revit's the pretty nice tool here to sort of help you manage that, to do it within a set of constraints. And then what you can see here in this view tab is that we can always cut sections through things. We can always create more 3D views. As you start to add windows and doors, this will automatically start to create schedules for, showing each door and each door type, window, each window type, each room tag, each door tag, etc. So again, it's mainly a database, that sort of helps to automate and reduce redundancy and error when you're trying to put together the drawing set and describe your design intent in a set of drawings that can be handed to a builder, to a general contractor. All right, so with that said, I've drawn some walls here. It's kind of a boring looking thing. But how did I get level one and level two? And how can I create more levels, or how can I begin to arrange these things? And I don't know, some of you have experience in the building industry and already. And one of the things that I always noticed, even when I was a freshman in school, was that, like again, when I'm looking down at something, I see grids and I want to draw grids and I like grids. Those can help define structural grids. Those can help define spatial modules. Those can help subdivide a large site into more manageable chunks, right? And so actually drawing grids is helpful. And so I wanted to show you guys some basics there before we get into the nitty gritty of let's bring our site in, let's bring our Rhino stuff in. So I'm going to go back to my level one floor plan. And I mean, these walls are great. I mean, they're just super, but I'm just gonna delete them. I don't think they're that great. Let's say this is looking down at my site, and I'm going to go to the architecture tab up here, right? I just keep going back and forth between tabs. So far, I've used architecture and I've used view. Go back to architecture, and I'm just going to look at some of these options. We have walls, doors, windows, columns, roofs, ceilings, and curtain wall grids, and mullions, and railings, and ramps, and stairs. All right, all the basic pieces of architecture, right? The componentry. And then there's other ways you can start to, cut through floors with shafts, to run systems up and down or to create holes in walls, etc. But what's really interesting over here at the very end, these datums, is that we have something called grid and we have something called level. So with grid, we can begin in top view and plan view. We can begin to draw a grid, right? And oftentimes this will correspond to a column grid, right? In other words, this will begin to uh, not just define and break up a large area into sort of a smaller module cadence, but we'll also begin to talk about how things work structurally, right? Oftentimes, we'll put these sort of grids in, and they correspond to the center lines where bearing walls, load bearing walls, or where columns are located, right? So if I go ahead and do this, first of all, I guess I went from top to bottom, and it wants to put this down at the bottom, of course. Now I'll just undo that, and I'll go from bottom to top. That way, my bubble labels will be up top here. Right. So now I put that. You can see that's labeled one automatically. And I can start from this one and just sort of move over. I'm just hovering my cursor. And let's say I go 20 feet out. It's going in 6-inch increments. That's nice. That's handy for me. And I go ahead and click and make another column grid line. And I'll just keep doing this. Let's go to 20 feet. All right. And not a big surprise here, but I can also do it in the other direction. So um, I can go in grid and I can go this way, right? And let's see. Now I can go down here. I could say 25 feet later. Let me zoom in so I get a little more granular here. There we go. Right. And if you look at a 140-foot site by 50 feet site, 140 divides into 20 7 times. And it divides the 50 feet, the short direction divides into 25 2 times. So that's where I recommend maybe starting and sort of trying to understand how to best use the proportions and constraints of the site. I'm just going to move this up away from the stupid center line. It wants to start to measure not from this line, but from this line, which is annoying sometimes. I really despise that when that happens. Let's see. Architecture, grid. Just going to go down to 25 feet away, draw one more, right? And I can go ahead and, I could always start to relabel these. Oftentimes you'll start with numbers in one direction and letters in the other direction. And that way, when you're having a conversation with the structural engineer, or you're having a conversation with the GC, she might say, "We have a problem with column 6 3, or sorry, B6," and then you can go to the exact location and understand exactly which column she's talking about, and try to figure out like what you screwed up in sections so that you don't have enough room to run the electrical conduit for the I don't know, the lighting underneath the structure, whatever it is, right? You can start to then have a common labeling so that you can start to fix things in real time here in Revit. So I can always double click on these labels and name that A, B, C. Becomes much more handy when you're actually making a set of drawings that you're gonna actually build from. All right, so that said, all I'm doing is I'm thinking ahead and just going through these. And this is what I typically do, right? I'll typically put in this grid and think about, okay, like how do I make a standard system? How do I think in terms of systems, standardize this thing, make things really clear and simple as much as possible. Building projects are really complex. If you start with a bunch of convoluted things, you're going to get something really Frankenstein-esque out. So I recommend always starting with simple, right? Clear, clarity. Um, anyway, I can again, like, let's say I think actually, when I look at how these are numbered, this one's numbered 3, and I started to change these labels to A. Let me just look and see. Well, if I draw this over, let's see, 20 feet, well, I recognize that this should be 4. No, it starts with whatever the last one was over here, C. Okay, so I just have to rename this one 4. And then maybe it keeps going after that, 5, 6, 7. But again, I'm just sort of showing you the basics, right? I never start something, whether it's in Rhino, whether it's in Revit, whether it's on a piece of trace on my desk, without sort of trying to sort of establish a grid. And part of this is trying to understand how you can work with or make some key basic decisions, working with the logic of structure and all that kind of stuff, so that you don't get stuck working against structure, right? You haven't tried to shoehorn it in at the end. It also is a nice way to sort of think about the site and how you can start to fit things on the site, right? So um, now I'm drawing this grid, but I really am not modeling anything yet. So let me go ahead and I'll just go ahead and get rid of this stuff. But we'll do this on the site once we get the site in here. One thing you'll notice is that I have a couple of boxes here. And those are going to show up in a big way. There's called scope boxes and section boxes, and they start to talk about how you take a larger model and you crop it so you only see a certain portion of it. It's kind of like a clipping plane in Rhino, or like what do you call it? A clipping mask in Illustrator, right? It's like a window. You see what's inside. You don't see what sort of extends outside of them. So we're going to have to adjust those because these are just made from the template, and they're not necessarily going to be very helpful for the site that we're using. I have the 3D view. I have a level 1 plan view. What I'm going to do is I'm going to think back to that model that we had. We made that IFC model of our site and exported it out from Forma. And that's what we're going to import into Revit to have our site inside of Revit. So what I'm going to do is right now I'm in the architecture tab, file, architecture, structure, concrete, steel, systems. I'm going to go to insert. That's a really, really key one here. And I could either import CAD and bring it in and just sort of leave it there, or I can say link the IFC file. What that'll do is that'll allow me to go back and make changes in the IFC file in a different platform. And then next time I open up Revit, you'll see those changes have updated because it's just sort of, it's always just opening up Revit, and then it goes and looks at that IFC file that's linked to, brings that geometry in temporarily as a link. All right, so I'm just going to say link IFC, and I'm just going to go to home and downloads. And look at that, we have some IFC files right here. I don't know which one's which. Oh, July 14th. That sounds like the day. Mid-July already? Holy moly. Time flies by, doesn't it? All right, you can see that it's basically bringing in that big site model of like half of downtown, or close to most of downtown. It's bringing it in, it's importing it sometime today. And one of the things that we'll have to look at is because we're using the template. I went back and forth on this. Do we just use no template and then make our own scope boxes when we need them, or do we just go with the default templates? So let's try this with the default template, and in the afternoon, if I need to throw a change up at you, we can. But I'm going to go to the 3D view and let's see if we have our site in here. Oh yeah, there it is. Holy cow. Bam, look at that. And so one of the things I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to understand where this is in relationship to my level one and level two, and as a result, where my plans are. So you can see here I have level one, I have a level two that's 4 meters, a level two that's 15 feet. This level two must have been from something from the forma, because this one starts to say 0 meters and 4 meters. Oy, okay. Oops. Maybe I don't want to delete that then. Just want to delete the meters. You can see that there's some overlap here. I want to delete the meters. Let's see. Nope. Boy, it really insists on doing this the hard way, doesn't it? Yes, get rid of that. I hate you. All right. Sorry. I yell at my computer all the time. I tell it all kinds of bad things. 0 feet. All right, there we are. And all right, 15 feet. You can see that these things sometimes are locked. You'll see a padlock, and sometimes you just have to unlock things. But what's interesting about this is I go to my section, you can see that I don't have any geometry selected, just my section is selected, that drawing itself. And so now I can go into the properties of this section and I can begin to say, don't crop, far clipping, no clip. I don't want to clip anything. I want to see the whole enchilada here. Scope box, none. Far clip offset. I just said no clipping, so I guess that doesn't matter. And I'm going to zoom out here, maybe against my better judgment. I'm trying to figure out where this is relationship to the site that I brought in, because annoyingly they're not quite lined up here. But um, let me see. There's a 3D view. Oh, I understand what I did. I deleted those elevation markers and it deleted the whole. It looks like it deleted the whole site. Oh, so I'm just going to undo. My bad. Yeah, I'm stupid. But here in the 3D view, I can see where those scope boxes are, right? And I can actually always just remove these scope boxes if I don't like them, right? Or I can expand them outwards and make them larger, right? I can always make my own new scope boxes if I need to. I'm just going to go ahead and what happens when I delete them? I'm just going to try that. Here's my scope box there. Let's see if it'll let me do these section boxes or not. I don't know. But let's see what the implications of that are in section. Looks like I still have some of these things. Here's my section window. This box here. My 3D view, I still have this, but for whatever reason, my section I don't. Same with my site here. Or sorry, same with my plan. Yeah. Mm. Okay. Okay. So this is where maybe I'm just going to back up and I'm going to do this over again, but I'm just going to use without the template. The template's useful to a point, but it's just getting in the way of things. So I kind of suspected that. I wanted to maybe go over that with you guys anyway. So I'm just going to say project new, Imperial multi-project. Before I do that, actually, I'm gonna go File. I'm gonna close this and not change and not save it. Okay, here we go. New Imperial multidiscipline. Instead of using a template, I'm just gonna say none. Hit OK. It's gonna ask me what units do I want. I'm gonna say Imperial, feet and inches, basically. Now you can see without all of that, there's less stuff here. So it has a level one, but that's it. It doesn't have a section, doesn't have anything else. So anyway, we're gonna have to create some of that stuff on our own now if we don't use that template, but that's fine. I'm comfortable with that for sure. Let's see here. So I'm going to go to Insert, Link IFC. There it is. Let's see what I see here in Plan. I might have to change some of the plan settings. You can see that it's added some sort of, I guess this is some sort of extents, even though I'm not really seeing anything here. So if I go to level one, let me just go and see if I can change some of this stuff. Range base level, I'm going to say none for right now. Well, actually, I'll go to level one. Let's try that. Crop view, no annotation crop. So, scope box, none. Columns, let's see, depth clipping, none. All right, let's see what I see when I go to view, and let's make a 3D view. Okay, here it is. Here's my box again, I guess. When I go to view, I can actually make, let's say my first floor plan, I can actually make a new scope box. That's really handy. Let's say if you have a big overall site, you can add a scope box that just lets you just see the parts that you really need at the moment. You can make multiple scope boxes. So you can make one for, let's say, what you want to see when you want to see a big site plan, what you want to see for your actual floor plans, and make that, versus, let's say, turning off the scope boxes and seeing that whole of downtown for some reason. Let's see here. Why am I not seeing anything in my plan view? This is concerning to me. Let's go to shaded and see if that changes anything. I might just have to screw around with this over lunchtime between now and the afternoon. But anyway, again, let's say if I go to 3D view, um, there we are. I can go to, let's see, I wonder why hmm. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and use this over here. Oh, and I can see that the section box is oh, I see. This thing's floating way above. Yeah, that's a problem. Maybe this is in maybe this thinks this is sea level or something. Yikes, I don't know. What the crap? All right. That's annoying. Why it does that, I don't know. But what we can actually do is we can turn our level one into something that actually goes to this, or we can move this down one way or the other. But what I would probably prefer to do is maybe move this down. So that's at level one. So let me just take a look at this name, mark, project information. There's not going to be anything in there. That's just a bunch of metadata data. It's LinkedIn. Ay, ay, ay. There's our levels one and two. That's why we couldn't see anything in our plan view. Our plan view is way up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my level one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to view. I'm going to make a section. This section will allow me to see it from the side. So I can go to this section. You can see now I have a section in my project browser and the section one inside of that. And you can see now if I turn this, and bring it up a bit, I can start to see everything in my side view. Yeah, and I can actually let me go to my 3D view and well, let's just zoom in. Let me try to find our site here. always an adventure, but it looks like that's our site right there. There it is. And so let's see. It's not going to let me just select that, is it? Ay, 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 ay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to level 3D view. Let's see. Can I do a scope box in here? I can't, of course. So I'm going to go back to my section. It's kind of annoying to have to do this, but it is what it is. Because this is one big mesh, I can't just delete or I can't just select each individual mass. Uh, and that way, then I could sort of see in blue highlighted where my site is, as opposed to everything else. But I can go to my 3D view and let's see what I have here. Where's that section at? There's my floor plans. Okay. So it's got to be somewhere over here. And in section, doesn't look like I make a scope box there. In plan, looks like maybe I can. All right, well, I'm not going to bother with this too much longer, except to say, let's see. I'm going to go to architecture and I'm going to make my own new level here. So remember when I went to architecture tab, I had something called grids over here. I can make grid lines in plan. Here I can make the grid and the vertical, right? These are the levels. These are where I can make my own levels. By default, Revit has made level 1 and level 2 for me. Over down here, that's not very handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one up here. Okay. And when I do that, let's see, it's giving me this warning. All right. So if I go to my section properties, let's see. This is always the pain in the rump. I'll go over this and over lunchtime and make a decision on how best to approach this, whether we use the template or we just make our own scope boxes. What you can see is that can be really cumbersome when you have a really large section of site, and then you're trying to find your thing over. You're trying to find your site in here and trying to sort of set everything up for your project. That in itself is a task and not a short one. That's why I wanted to get us going with this sooner rather than later. I'm going to say don't crop view, don't crop region, clip with outline, clip, no clip for the moment. Hit OK. There we go. Now we can sort of see everything at once. The section isn't even being clipped anymore. So let's see. Let me try this now. Let me add, oh, wrong one. Architecture level. And I'll just add one up here somewhere that maybe we can use and get a floor plan from. All right. So if I look at this level, it's called, let's see, there's that end. Where's the other end of it? Here it is. Is there no bubble, really? It's been a while. Let's see. It's not giving me any label. That's weird. If I go to view, I can say, let's make a floor plan from level 3, which I guess this would be now. All right, now we have a level 3 plan and we can actually see most of our site here. So now we can actually start to arrange boxes, right? So we can go over this step by step together in the afternoon and even tomorrow morning again if we need to. But I did want to sort of show you what this stuff looks like. And don't worry, when it comes to this project setup, it's a little cumbersome at the beginning. That said, when you're actually working at a firm, usually there's somebody that does this ahead of time at the beginning. Usually have the office usually has some standards um, and some standard templates to work with. But we just need to sort of dive right in and try this out. It looks like our site's right here, which is kind of nice because we have our box right here. So that didn't do too bad there. Let me look at this and see if I can stretch this, of course. Now I just need to rotate it. Why is it not rotating? Maybe it's locked or something. Sometimes it has a padlock or a pin stuck in it. I can click this and then change which direction the section's looking, but this should cycle section. No. I don't know. It should be able to let us rotate it. Maybe if I just select it, modify, use rotate. There we go. Then I could actually make it actually align with longitudinally along the site. All right, there we go. Okay. And this is a plan. And so maybe I do make my own, quickly make my own view scope box. And I'll select that scope box. I'll look at it three-dimensionally and in section here, see where this thing's actually located. Where's that scope box at? I had it selected. Level 3. There it is. Views visible. Section visible. Structural. Yeah, okay. Floor plan. All right. Visible, visible, visible. Let's see here. Height. Let's make this something ridiculously tall. 200 feet or something. Make it really stand out. In my section, then why don't I see it? Well, anyway, I'll work on this over the lunch break, and I use a Revit just enough that I remember mostly where things are, but then of course when I need things the most, sometimes I really have to think hard about where something is. Let's see, what is this? This is level 1. Oh, okay. Just delete that. I'm just going to delete these old levels here. But I think it's going to delete or do everything at once. That's fine. I don't care. It's fine. Everything's fine. All right. Here's my new scope box. Three-dimensionally, that scope box looks like it's here. Um, just try to figure out where this is actually at. I'm going to make it deeper. There we go. There, level 3. We can use this scope box to, begin to define just the immediate area around our sites. There we are. Yeah, something like that, maybe. Then in my level 3 plan, what I can do is I can go to my level 3 plan and I can then start to say, well, let's go ahead and let's let's use scope box 1 that I just made and hit apply. And now I can see everything inside the scope box, but I don't have to see the entire downtown area in order to, start to model inside. Okie doke. So we'll wade into these waters with more detail in the afternoon and early tomorrow morning. Um, But what I did want to do is also show you where else we're going with this. So if I want to bring in, let's say, my Rhino file, I can do that as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say insert, and I'm going to say link a CAD file, right? Rhino's a computer-aided design platform, just like AutoCAD. So I can say link a CAD file, and it's going to ask you the files of what type. You can see that there's all kinds of, the typical DWG, DXF. Those are common drawing formats. We have SAT files, we have DGN files, those are microstation for Triforma. We have OBJ files, those are mesh files that were fairly common back in the days of 3D Studio, Viz, and Max. We have native Rhino files, native SketchUp files. Then we have STLs, those are stereolithography models, those are common for bringing out model files for 3D printing. And then we have something called STEP, which actually preserves surface and mesh information in case you wanted to actually manufacture this with, like, say, a CNC router and start carving things out of it. So anyway, I'm going to say Rhino models, and I can go to my, let's see, where would it be? Probably now I'm in downloads. I want to go back to documents. There's something called teaching here, probably. Teaching, there we are. And let's see, summer 2026. That sounds about right. Let's say I want to bring this dude in, right? I can start to link this guy in. You can see it's just a little off. It's not quite in the right place, but it's close. So I'd go back into Rhino and move that in position. And the next time I open this, then it'll be in the right place and linked up, right? So now I go to 3D and let me just look at an axon here. And Sorry, I'm struggling here with trying to recognize things, but it looks like it should be right over here. Oh yeah, and there it is, right? So there's our Rhino model. All right. Like I said, these are a bunch of non-standard walls with cutouts in weird ways. So we can leave it as just this sort of generic model that we're entering in and then build around it, right? You're going to have you have two of these and you're going to have four of them. So putting them all in the right place in the right file, so that you can link them into Revit and we can start to build around those. That's what we'll focus on this afternoon, getting everything together, so that we can start to build things around it. But suffice to say, if I just think about this just for the moment, let me go to my level three or whatever it's called, right? What we're going to do is in here, we're going to start with, basically looking at our site outline. Let's see. We'll start to introduce a grid, 20 feet over. We'll start to, we'll start to make a steel grid. I'll just quickly do this. We'll basically make an armature for these vessels to then be to sit into, to insert into. And then the rest of the building will be this sort of steel frame, and corridors and core stuff, in between, around, underneath, however you want to do it. And so once we do this, let's see, let me just add a little bit of grid here, just so we have enough here. You can see that it's IntelliSensing that, I can start to work with the angle of stuff in a precise way. I don't necessarily have to turn everything so it's X, Y if I don't want to, if it's a pain in the rear. But what next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually add structure. So we're going to go to structure, we'll go to columns, and oh, I need to, because there's no template, I need to load a structural family. Yeah, we'll use a template. So I'll work on playing around with the templates here now that I know where everything's at. So we'll do this in full, this afternoon and then tomorrow morning as well. Tomorrow morning will be another demonstration, and recorded. I can recap this where we went over the afternoon and then build on it. We'll start to build a steel frame, both columns and beams, make sure everything lines up. And then with our inserted Rhino vessels, then we'll start talking about other components over the next week or two, like floor slabs, ramps, stairs, elevators, penthouses, and moving systems up and down, and then laterally, like a trunk of a tree, and then the branches. So we have a lot to talk about over the next rest of July, before we finalize everything. But suffice to say, now we're entering some new territory. I'm overlaying a new platform. It's complex, and it'll take a little bit of getting used to. But this is what it's like to work in architecture in the 21st century, right? It's not as easy as, or tedious, I guess you might also say, as give me a piece of paper and give me the drafting table and I'll draw it somehow, from 13 different directions. And if I change it, then I have to start all over again and redraw it 13 from 13 different directions. It's more like, how do I begin to make a virtual model here? How do I bring it to this platform? Again, it's like, the metaphor I use a lot is like, when I'm doing some trim carpentry around the house. I don't get out my big framing hammer. That's really helpful when I'm putting framing walls, but it's not really helpful when I'm doing, uh, you know, finish carpentry. I have a much smaller hammer. I have a tape measure. I have a speed square. I have a pencil. I have a chalk line. I have a plumb bob. If you think about these tools, these software tools, the same way, right? What you want to do is you want to have and understand that you have a plethora of platforms in your tool belt, so to say. And it's about knowing what each one does and how to bring information from one to the next. Okay. Revit is a good one to sort of incorporate everything that you do into one place as a database by the end. And of course, you can also use it to model some of these typical things. So, what this means is that if I start to model a column, I don't just like draw a shape and extrude it up like in Rhino. What it does is it actually brings in the steel catalog and it asks me, okay, well, what kind of shape? Is it a hollow steel tube? Is it a W shape, like a wide flange, like an I-beam, right? But it's a column. Um, And then when I pick that, then it starts to give me all the standard measurements, right? So maybe I could pick a W22 by 18, which means that it's 22 inches deep and it weighs 18 pounds per linear foot. And I can start to pick and choose from a standard set of components and start to build a frame that has a sort of the economy of scale from the production logic sort of baked in to what you're actually modeling, right? So again, we'll cover more of that tomorrow in our demonstration. Let me see here though. But if I just say column, it says no structural families loaded, structural precast. What are you looking for? Oh my gosh, this is so annoying. Structural. I don't want precast. Hmm. All right, let's see here. Preview up. No, that's where I was. Go to autodesk.com. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to manage, and this is how you can start to, let's see, is it manage or is it insert? Manage links. No, it's not manage. Insert maybe. Yeah. Load family, load Autodesk family. I can go to the Autodesk standard catalog of stuff, and let's look for steel, or let's say columns. Columns is an interesting word, an M and an N together. It's not something you typically see in a thing. So I can I now you can see I have C shapes, C channels, all kinds of weird shaped flanges. I have all the kinds of stuff that I might model inside a concrete um, uh, column before it's cast. I have HP shapes, HP bearing, hollow steel tube, HSS. Let's go for W shapes. Let's find those. W wide flange, W shaped columns, W shaped columns. I'm just going to select all of these and hit load. If I did the template, these would already be loaded in for me. Uh, okay. I'm just going to select all of them and hit OK. Like, like I said, sometimes it asks you for information you have no business knowing at the very beginning of a design project. Let's see, structure, column. And now I have a list of these things. So if I go wide flanges, I can start to look and I go, do I want a W10, W44? That's a one big dude. That's a huge column. I don't think we need that. We're not making the Burj Khalifa. It's not going to be the tallest thing in the world. Maybe I'll go with the W10 by 33. So that's a 10 inch deep W flange. Um, what that means by depth is this. This is the depth. So when you look at this and you go W something by something else, this first number is depth, and then this is the sort of weight per linear foot. So if I just took a foot of this extrusion and weighed it, then that gives you this number, and that usually has to do with how this is called the web, and this is called the flange, and this is the bottom flange. And so that usually has to deal with how thick and beefy those flanges are on the top and the bottoms. Anyway, uh, sorry, just a little bit of structure here. That's what those numbers mean. So W10 by 33 means it's 10 feet deep and 33 pounds per linear foot. Not, 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 not bad. All right. And let me look at this. So let's see here. As I start to put these in, let me see if I can have it actually click right there. None of the created elements are visible in floor plan level 3. And that is because it has no top connection and no base connection. So the base connection, top connection, it's not giving me that. Move with the grids. Anyway, we'll start to do this tomorrow. We'll start, or maybe even this afternoon if we have time. All right. So that's a really quick, like, what's your appetite? This is what Revit looks like. you can see that even folks who use it all the time, sometimes you have to Google things, try to remember where things are, or you can't quite, something doesn't look right. This is the first time I'm opened up 2027. It's a little different than 2026, but it's mostly the same. There's some interesting things here. Oh, I see, unconnected. I connect that to level three. Uh, Wait, what? Ay, ay, ay. It wants to actually draw to level three. Oh, I see. There's no top constraint. Here, let me go to my section. Good freaking God, stop it, Revit. I'll just use the template next time and I can move some things around. And we'll do that in the afternoon when we actually try to do this step by step together and everybody gets a working file. Okay. Let's see. A couple of other really nice things. And again, I'm not going into lower level details and just yet, but the ni other nice thing about this is I can do things like I can turn on the sun and the sun path. I haven't actually given it a latitude or location yet, but I need to do that. I can do that easily. And I can select this and I can say sun path size and scale it and move it about so that's centered up around my um, uh, let's see, sun path on, sun settings, single day, location isn't set. That's probably a big problem. Wants to default in Boston, eh? All right. Let's go to Las Vegas instead. Las Vegas, Venezuela, Las Vegas, Nevada. Let's try that. Yeah. Right. So now I can actually turn on the sun and start to see things in Revit. Just kind of nice. Yeah. Anyway, so there's things we can do. I can always turn this to shaded. I could always turn on, let's see, where are the shadows on, right? And start to see how things actually work here. Um, Again, it just looks like a CAD view. Um, and then another nice thing about this is that you can start to, I think under the Manage tool, um, let's see, maybe it's View, is that you can begin connect rendering engines to it. For our purposes, I'll show you Twin Motion because that's a freebie and it works on both the Mac and the Windows operating systems. And it already comes with a preset switch to sort of toggle and stream things back to Twin Motion. But you can always, as you develop your own sort of expertise and look into these tools, some of you are well aware that there are other tools like Inkscape or like D5, Redshift, Render, V-Ray, Maxwell. I mean, there's a bazillion different sort of rendering engines that you might have to pay for or might find a free version of. Just don't let me know that you might like better. But Twin Motion we'll go over towards the end of July to start to do some renderings and all right, that aren't just soft clay Rhino renderings. But when we bring everything together in Revit, that's when we can start to make finalized renderings in Twin Motion. All right. Yeah, so this is what Revit looks like. And like I said, it looks a little cumbersome, but honestly, it's once you get used to it, I think you'll all kind of start to enjoy it. Let's go to my 3D view. I don't want to see this whole thing again. So let me go to 3D view and I'll say use this scope box one, apply. Now I've cut it off, so I just see this part, right? It's kind of nice. Now I don't have to sort of pick it out of trying to find a straw in a haystack sort of thing. But okie doke. Let's turn that sun path off. Drives me crazy. I'm so not used to using the mouse in Revit. It's like such a different experience, unfortunately. So that's another thing you'll have to get used to here, but I'll go ahead and turn it this way. Let's see. Again, we'll go over this in detail when we get there. We cross these bridges later, but just to show you, again, if I go to view and go under 3D view, instead of just a default 3D view like an Axon, I can always give it a camera. And I could say the camera is here and it's pointed this way. And now I have a 3D view on the inside that I can begin to manipulate. I can start to change the camera location, the camera target, the size of the frame. I can go to level 3 and I can say, well, the camera actually needs to be in here. I can go to my section. My section needs some help here. My section, I'm going to go ahead and crop that as well using, let's see, crop view, crop read. Let's see, scope box. Here we go. I'll give it my scope box. Hopefully. Why is it not showing up? Sometimes I absolutely hate Revit. I love Revit, except when it doesn't work. Um, Crop region visible. Why is it doing this? Let's say none again. Let's say far clip active. Section box, yes. But then the scope box, we should be cutting inside of the scope box. Well, whatever. Anyway, maybe the section is in a bad place, and that's why I don't know. I thought maybe I could see camera, but apparently not. Let me go to my 3D view here. You can see that yeah, I'm starting to see inside this thing, and oh, hi Chihuahua. All right, so the more I sort of scroll back and forth, the more sort of weird perspective I get. But I can always change that later. I can come back, or maybe I just say this 3D view. Let's just go ahead and delete it. It's junk. No, just don't save. Yeah, can you just delete it? It's like, it drives me crazy. Oh, I guess I just did the wrong 3D view. Okay, maybe I should have saved so I can undo that. Anyway, 3D view, default 3D view. Here we go. 3D view. Let me add this scope box so I can see a little easier. Can always turn this on or off. But for right now, I just want to get it off. And let's take a look at this. Yeah. All right. So anyway, you'd notice that when I deleted that view, it deleted the camera that was making that view. But anyway, I can always do that. Here's what I suspect. I need to cut a new section. I'll cut it right through here. There we go. And that section is called section 2. Ah, there we are. Yes, yes, yes. All right. Anyway, that's that. Now I'm cutting a section through this and thing from Rhino, and it's not actually cutting the thing in Rhino in section. So we'll have some work to do. Suffice to say, I have to start selecting. I think it's in the section. I have to start talking about generic objects and other things that are inserted, and give it some cut parameters and things like that. So we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty details with Revit. It's because since we'll be bringing stuff in from Forma and stuff in from Rhino. But suffice to say, it should work out well once we calibrate everything. Okie doke. So that's it for this morning. Like I said, in the afternoon, we'll pick up here and actually start to do things step by step together. Um, and then, like I said, we won't go too far along. We can always recap again tomorrow morning, and then we'll start to model some more things in the morning here on Revit. So we'll get everything sort of set up and talk about how to go back and forth now between Rhino and Revit a little more fluidly. But okie doke. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording. You guys had stuff to do today, and those of you who let's see, stop